And just when you thought that President Obama couldn't take another headache with another policy from his administration, here comes a ruling about the NSA and spying. Ho, 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 George Orwell is not spinning in his grave. He's sitting up and paying attention, and so should you, to this version of Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Who's watching? Who's watching me?
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, in which collectively continue to tolerate the insanity power on the streets of South Chicago and Texas of Florida.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizens.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
Feel like a black republic, money I got coming in. Can't turn my back
As
on the
my
hood,
friend
I got love
Cliff
for them.
Kelly
Can't clean my
likes to
act
say to
good,
start his
so
show
I'm
on
good.
WVON, hello, hello, hello. Now, unlike Cliff Kelly, I'm not going to tell you that this is the Cliff Kelly Show, because it's not. I'm Lenny McAllister, and this is Get Right with Lenny McAllister, where you and I have another wonderful opportunity to talk about the latest and greatest in news, or at least one thing. Because we could sit here, and we don't have that much time. There are so many things going on. So let me just get through the preliminary type of information sharing that we got to go through at the beginning of every podcast. You know where to get in touch with me on Twitter, LennyMcAllister. 3 L's total. 1 in the first name, 2 in the last name, 1 C, 2 N's, no IE, yada, yada, yada. You're like, huh? Look, Lenny McAllister. That's on Twitter. If you want to find me on Facebook, same thing, Lenny McAllister. 2 pages, 1 guy, you and I sharing opinions, sharing perspectives, etc. Now that I got that out of the way, you gotta feel bad for President Obama. Not that I agree with the NSA policy, not that I agree with the Big Brother tactics, not that I agree with the Chicago-style politics of strong-arming people, accumulating as much information as possible, and knowing what to use against folks. So that when it comes to things such as having the IRS go after certain groups, that you have the information, background information, if you will, to do so, certain keywords or blah, blah, blah. I'm not going into that. I'm just saying, por ejemplo. When you look at this, the reason why I feel bad for President Obama is he can't catch a break now. You can make the argument, and I have plenty of times, and you can agree, disagree on Twitter or Facebook with me. You can make the argument that he doesn't deserve the breaks. A lot of this is of his own doing, and because it's of his own doing, as this stuff continues to unravel, as he has gone from an historic, it was a historic high in January 2009. A historic amount of political capital. We hadn't seen anybody come into the White House with this level of political capital since John F. Kennedy. And I would even venture to say that he had more than Kennedy because he was the first African-American president. Now, because he was the first African-American president, because people just simply did not like George W. Bush as he was walking out the door, 29% approval rating, which means Republicans and Democrats generally bashed this guy. He left office the month before. You had somebody overseas throwing a shoe at him during a press conference. All this other kind of hogwash was going on. You had the Great Recession. You had the Wall Street crash. Everything else was going on. This president has gone, number 44, from an extremely high level of political capital all the way down to where he can't possibly want anybody in his PR department to turn on the news, because there's always something reminding him that this is just a continuously unraveling ball of yarn for this administration. So let's get right into it. If you haven't heard, So far, we now have at least one court, one judge, that not only says what the NSA is doing, that it's unconstitutional, that what they're doing is not only unconstitutional, but that it is unconstitutional at a very alarming rate. Now, it's not the first time that the government's done something that's been alarming that we should take note of, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the first time that they can literally track your whole life. Your whole life. You can never do this at this level before. We're literally, through the power of the federal government, through the resources of the federal government, and under the guise, through the NSA, that we're doing this to keep Americans safe. Never before has a government agency been able to track every single aspect of an American's life so easily. I mean, you can track one person here or there, but you're not going to assign a whole bunch of FBI and CIA agents to follow a whole slew of Americans around constantly and consistently. But the way you have electronic monitoring today, you can find people from hitting their laptop to hitting their phone to tracking them around when they drive or when they're on the subway or when they walk, all the way to where they go to work, when they go to work, when they punch in, when they punch out. You can take their debit card and credit card statements, and you can now see what they eat, when they eat, how they eat it, who they're with, because even when you go to cameras on the sidewalk, in a store, in a restaurant, at an intersection, you can tell everything. You know, you're in Illinois, in Indiana, you can go on iPass. You can see when people are going down the highway. And that's, obviously, you got that in other states throughout the Union. Never before has the federal government had this type of power. And this is the first judge to say what has to be obvious to the rest of America, which is simply this. This is extremely dangerous. This is not American. This is not American. I was going to say America. I got stumbled because this is not the America we grew up in, and this is not the American way of life. That's what I was going after. I was trying to combine that in the same sentence because this is scary. First of all, and I know people don't want to hear this, but this is the same argument that I had made previously with the TSA. This is the same argument that I made after 9/11. This is the same argument that has been made time and time again. In fact, people try to make this from an economic point of view. It's a different argument there. You can make sure that people are not discriminated against. There is nothing that the federal government can do in a free society where people have liberty. There's nothing that the federal government can do that is 100% foolproof. There's nothing that the federal government can do that is 100% foolproof when it comes to keeping you safe. You can't be 100% safe and free. God gives us free will. And again, you know, people say, well, you said you weren't a Bible thumper. I'm not a Bible thumper. But the Constitution was written by people that believed in God. And if you believe in God, like I believe in God and the framers of the Constitution did, if you believe in God and the Constitution, then you believe in free will. And if you believe in free will and you believe in liberty, people have the freedom to do things that are inappropriate, including murder fellow Americans, fellow human beings. That's just the way it is. Doesn't mean that we accept it, doesn't mean that we like it, but that is the way it is. Now, you can do as much as you possibly can to prevent that. Not just retroactively deal with it. You can do things to prevent it, but there's a line because of free will that you're never going to be able to cross without impeding free will and liberty. And once you do that from a biblical point of view, you're trying to be God, and that's not cool. But from a secular and constitutional point of view, you are inappropriate. You are stepping over the line. You are now infringing upon those God-given rights of liberty. And this NSA thing, anybody that heard this from Edward Snowden, and I still don't know what I think about Edward Snowden. There are plenty of people that think he's a patriot. You know, you can agree or disagree with me on this as well. You know where to find me on Twitter and on Facebook. Twitter, LENNYMCALLISTER. On Facebook, 2 pages, same Lenny McAllister. It really is me. Edward Snowden. I don't know if I want to call him a patriot. Because every time you hear something about Edward Snowden, now he wants to talk to Brazil. An open letter to Brazil. Really? We really want to go down this path with Edward Snowden? He wasn't a whistleblower that stood and blew the whistle and stood up in front of the American people and told us the truth. He's doing this in a way that I'll tell the truth, but it almost seems as though he's going to piecemeal people to see what he can get out of it. Can I get safety? Can I get money? Can I be taken care of? Can I do? And that bothers me. The whole Edward Snowden thing bothers me. And I've said this previously before. Number one, here's a guy that dropped out of high school. Number two, this was a guy that was not that great in the military. So he is not exemplary in any way, shape, or form. He gets access to all these confidential files, and he makes a very good six-figure salary in the process of doing it. He's not seen as a risk, and then he jumps out of the country. This isn't an above board type of guy. So if you're going to come to me and tell me this is a patriot, you're probably also, and I'm making assumptions, so I'm just going to go down this path, and I apologize prematurely. But these are the same types of assumptions and things that when people call him a patriot, people also make other assumptions about America. That when you look at the American society, one way or another, it's an argument about going against the extremes once again. Either he's a patriot and everything's wrong with the government, which everything's not wrong with the government. Or the other side, he's a traitor and hang him from the gallows. And you have to collect all this information in order to keep Americans safe, in which I've already said. You can't say that you are espousing liberty, but then you want all types of rights restricted in order to protect liberty. It doesn't work that way. You can't say smaller government, but you get the right to collect all this information. Rand Paul was right on this, and I know that the libertarian branch of the Republican Party, I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not, because libertarians that really want to win never run on their own. If you're a libertarian and you actually want to win the race, you end up running as a Republican. So let's not tell me that there's not a libertarian wing of the Republican Party. It's not a separate party for the most part. Any libertarian that has won a major election, 95% of the time, if not 100% of the time, they're part of the libertarian wing of the Republican Party. So let's just clarify that. That's where Rand Paul resides. He's not running as a libertarian. He's running within the libertarian wing of the Republican Party. With that said, though, that libertarian wing of the Republican Party is right on this issue. And at least it's intellectually and philosophically consistent. You can't say smaller government and then say bigger accumulation of information, bigger military, bigger rights for the military to protect your freedoms. It doesn't seem to make sense. Because it kind of goes back, and now I'm going to start twisting things all over again, but I think this is fun. It's kind of like saying corporations are people. The military is a person. The military is not a person. Corporations are not people. And there are lines that we seem to consistently, and this is the bigger philosophical thing with this NSA thing. And again, I feel bad for President Obama because he's not going to get a break until he leaves and goes to Hawaii. He's not going back to Chicago. He'll stay in D.C. for a second, let his younger daughter graduate, and then he's going to Hawaii and he's staying out of the limelight. That's my take. They can't keep him safe in Chicago, I don't think. I don't think he wants to be all up in the mix all like that. He'll visit Chicago. He ain't going to live there. But until he goes to Hawaii after he's done in 2017, he's going to continuously get barraged with stories like this. That's just all there is to it. So I feel bad for that, but again, he brought a lot of this on himself. If the policies were there, he continued the policies after saying that he was going to roll back these policies. Or some of these policies he instituted under his administration. After all, he's been there since 2009. So let's not make it seem as though he's innocent either. But with that said, as you look at the issues that everyday Americans are facing when you address the NSA situation, when you address the fact that personal liberties, personal privacies are being invaded unnecessarily, everybody is not 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from a terrorist, despite what we may hear. And even if we all were, there's nothing that human beings can do to keep you 100% safe. Again, remember, it was by the grace of God that plane didn't blow up in Detroit Christmas Day 2009. It was by the grace of God that a bystander saw the suspicious vehicle in Times Square in May of 2010. This was not government that saved this. This was the grace of God working through average everyday people. In the case of the underwear bomber, a teenager being so nervous that he didn't know how to blow himself up. Which to this day, I wouldn't be surprised if subconsciously he said, I don't want to die yet. I can't believe I'm in this situation, but I can still mess this up enough where I'm still alive. So, the NSA didn't do that. The NSA did not do those things, did not prevent those things. So, as the courts get more involved in this, as more Americans get outraged, as this will probably be swept underneath the rug, as we'll hear a little bit more about Edward Snowden's excellent adventure overseas, or Brazilian vacation, or anything else that's going to end up coming up, we have to take into consideration, we have to keep this in mind, we have to remember, and I'm saying this for emphasis, there's nothing the government can do to keep you 100% safe. And once you accept that fact, whether you're a conservative or a liberal, once you accept that fact that you can do as close as you want to 100%, but it's never going to be exactly 100%. Once you do that, and you remember that we have a Constitution that protects God-given rights, Christian conservative, but try not to Bible thump. Once you combine those two aspects in this argument, there's no way you can logically, politically, or ethically be for what's going on under the Obama administration when it comes to NSA collection of information. There's no way you can do that. None of it jibes. Either you don't believe in the first half of that equation, which I put together for you, that the government can't keep you 100% safe, and that the Constitution protects God-given rights to liberty and privacy and self-determination. Either you don't believe in those two things, or you don't believe that America needs to continue to look like what it espouses itself to be. Now, if you don't believe in the second half of the equation, then that kind of goes into some of the things that people like to throw back and forth. You're a socialist, you're a communist, you're a fascist. Maybe you are one of those things. Because at that point in time, you believe in a government that is so far right-wing that it can do anything it wants under the guise of national sovereignty, which obviously no one's sovereign at that point in time. And just the same, you could sit there and say that we all have to give into the collective at such a high rate that we're in this together, fully vested, all equally invested, except for the ruling class, which gets you into this communistic point of view. You might as well be North Korea or the former Soviet Union, because at some point in time, you're not going to question the government because the government knows best, and we just need to do our part. Either way, it's wrong. Either way, it's extreme. The NSA can collect all at once, but once it crosses that line, once it tries to play God electronically, that's a problem constitutionally. And to hear this judge say that this week should not be a shock to anybody. Now, what we need to pay attention to, and what I'd like your feedback on as well, is where does the Obama administration go from here? Where does Congress go from here? I've heard the arguments all throughout the day yesterday from people in the intelligence community saying, well, a judge can't make this determination. This is up to the president, who is the commander-in-chief. This is up to the Congress, who's accountable to the American people, either once every 2 years, or if you're in the senatorial side of things, once every 6 years. They're the people that deal with foreign policies, and therefore they are the ones that should be held accountable to this, and judges should not get in the way of this. That makes sense from a foreign policy perspective, but before you have foreign policy, you still have the United States of America, you still have a constitution under which people are guaranteed certain inalienable rights as citizens. there's still a certain template for citizenship that supersedes foreign policy affairs. I don't care what anybody says, because before there was international terrorism in the 21st century, before there was 9/11, before there was Pearl Harbor, before there were spies between the Soviet Union and the United States, before there were spies between the Axis powers and the Western Allies and Russia, before all of this, there was a constitution that guaranteed certain inalienable rights that came from God. God-given rights, including privacy, including self-determination, including the right to not have government step through every aspect of your life just because. And it doesn't matter what excuse government has, even if it is an altruistic excuse. It's still not the same as making sure that individual has the right to privacy, liberty, self-determination. And I don't care what anybody says. Once the NSA starts collecting this stuff, the stuff can be corrupted. Once the stuff is corrupted, you start having people's rights infringed upon. Once your rights are infringed upon and it's condoned, tolerated, and even, perhaps, dare I say, encouraged, you're no longer talking about the United States Constitution or the United States of America. That's what's at stake. That is what we need to take away from all this as this NSA controversy starts to hit the courts. Oy vey. And if I were President Obama, it'd be a lot more than taking 2 Advils and call me in the morning. Because this is one heck of a headache that collectively is not going away until January 20th, 2017. But hey, some of this he brought on himself. Some of this just comes with the job. What's your take on this? You know where to find me on Twitter, LENNYMCALLISTER, Facebook, tinyurl.com/Lenny Page. Love to talk to you. Looking forward to talking to you Wednesday. I'm sure there'll be a lot more with this NSA stuff. I'm sure there'll be a lot more coming up with the other controversies between the budget deal and everything else that we've been talking about over the last several days. Hopefully nobody else will be taking a selfie. Anywho, in the meanwhile, you enjoy the rest of your day. You know I love you. I'll talk to you soon. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.